fechamento.com.
Good afternoon to everyone and good morning to Sam. I can see we have a lot of speakers based in LATAM and in the US, so good morning to you. And thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. We have a very busy roundtable, and today's webinar will be on the impact of COVID-19 on international trade and what opportunities have arisen from COVID in Latin American markets. When we talk about Latin American markets, today we want to give focus of Spain as a hub for Latin America, with Italy as the country of origin of these investments, and Spain and Portugal as a hub for LATAM. So before we start, I would like to thank AICE, which is the Italian Association of Foreign Trade in Italy, Sociedad Nero Seti, which is our chamber member, and Alliance for Business Lawyers for your availability to be here with us today, given the complexity of having so many different partners of lawyers from various countries here with us today. So thank you all for your collaboration and your participation today. And as I was saying, since the start of since the first recorded last year in China, COVID has spread around the planet and sending billions of people into lockdown as health services struggle to cope. This has clearly created a lot of health, economic, and social problems. But given that we're coming out from lockdown at different stages, and the US and we believe the US and Latin America, which are having the worst impact of a pandemic right now, we believe they will clearly most likely follow the same path as the EU. And with this in mind, we think that they will stabilize these markets, and after the peak, we think it could be a good opportunity to start looking into these markets that are interesting, and given that as in other European markets and around the world, they're pumping money into the economy and taking measures to revive the economy. So without going further, I would like to introduce our speakers today, which we have Stefano Candela from Italy, from Avvocati Associati Sociedad Nero Seti. Hello, Stefano. We have Laura Gobernado Guzman from Spain, MG Lawyers, Abogados. We have Luis Rolo from SCA Global in Portugal. We have Hello. We have Ángel Castro from MG Abogados Peru. We have Claudia Riedel from DDSA in Brazil, São Paulo, and Laerte Castro Alves in Fortaleza from Amaral Advogados. We have Maria Claudia Vidal from FSDA in Argentina. We have Manuel Leza from BP Tax Global Advisor in Uruguay. We have Reid McCaffrey from Rascal Clark in Miami. And we have Mike Brown from Brown G and Wenger in San Francisco. So welcome everyone, and again, thank you very much for being here with us today. So given that everything that has been happening with this pandemic, that it's taken everyone by surprise, I would like first to start make a question to your colleagues in Europe, mainly in Italy, Spain, and Portugal, and ask you, how has this pandemic affected foreign trade, and how would you expect these changes to impact foreign trade after the pandemic? What are you seeing with the clients you're supporting? What can we expect with that's going to happen to the exports to Latin America by EU national companies? Can you give us an insight, for example, Laura?
Of course.
Hello, everybody, and good afternoon, and thanks again for attending this webinar. As Yolanda said, my name is Laura Gimeno. I'm partner at MG Abogados in Madrid. And well, concerning to answer Yolanda's question, firstly, starting from a general point of view, of course, this pandemic has changed, and it's going to change even more, the international transactions. From our legal and practical view at our law office, it's clear that some specific clauses regulating force majeure will be included in the contracts, in the international agreements between parties. Being clauses concerning force majeure mentioned war situations, earthquakes, etc., and allow directly the resolution of the contract in these cases. But now I think we will take into account specifically the case of a pandemic and what to do in lockdown situations. We highly recommend that the new contracts that are signed include force majeure and its effect, specifically considering the case of COVID-19 in the way that may affect the concrete sector in question of our clients. Also, depending on the applicable law, the concept of force majeure in that jurisdiction must be studied to assess whether it damages or favors the company in the current situation. Also, it is very likely that this emergency period in which we find ourselves will lead to breaches of contracts that will lead to possible litigation. From our point of view, it is advisable that to avoid that litigation and reach a balanced agreement between the parties, amongst other reasons, one very important one, due to the foreseeable saturation of the courts. I think that will be the case in Spain and also abroad. That would generate a delay in the judicial terms. Also, an alternative is a voluntary submission to mediation or arbitration that the parties could include in the contracts or agree to submit to. Secondly, to be a little bit more concrete and more specific about the subject of our present webinar, concerning export-import and international relations with LATAM by European companies. Our point of view is that several countries in Latin America are right now taking care of protection measures for the international commerce, as they certainly know that part of their economic recovery depends on it. For example, in the exceptions stipulated in decrees of lockdown, it is established specifically that the movement of cargo for the purpose of its commercialization is allowed, for example, in Colombia or in Peru. Also, alternatives for products that were imported from Asia are found now in other markets, so there will be new markets for other products that were not previously taken into account. That's a very important thing to consider too, because European companies have a hole to fill in that sense. On the other hand, the decrease of the price of raw materials makes it an attractive destination for purchasing. And also in the other sense, so the other way around, we think Latin America will be interested in acquiring medical devices from the EU, and the experience, of course, already gained from the pandemic in fields like, for example, technology. Without doubt, the way we work and communicate with clients, suppliers, and co-workers has and will change after COVID. Increasingly, teleworking and remote access will be accepted as a viable way to continue operating normally. Consequently, our world will further migrate to the cloud, and increasingly smart visual applications will be developed and will accelerate business efficiency and productivity. So it is likely thus that LATAM will require EU experience in this field. Also, ESG, environmental, social, and governance investment, it's very important. Sustainability now, as you all know, is the most important aspect when investing right now in a company. And to determine the degree of sustainability, it is essential to analyze in detail both its environmental impact and its social corporate governance policies. The demand of renewable energy will increase, as will the demand for products and services that contribute to a cleaner and more efficient world than in the past. And we believe that the adoption of ESG investment will accelerate in the coming years, and LATAM will be interested also in this sector and in our experience. Concerning automation too, It is evident that any type of industrial disruption, whether due to a global pandemic or another type of economic shock, forces management teams to carefully evaluate their business models, and in this sense, automation gives companies greater flexibility in terms of cost and capacity. In addition, automation is linked to digitalization and technology, three themes that present a structural demand now. And last but not least, health experience, of course. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the lack of capacity and resilience of nearly all healthcare systems, especially in those countries where investment in healthcare has been cut in recent years. And we hope that healthcare spending will increase again and experience will be needed. Greater attention will also be paid to cost efficiencies in areas with little innovation, such as generic drugs and relatively standard medical equipment and procedures. And I will leave now the word to my colleagues, but of course I will be happy to answer any questions you, Yolanda, or the audience may have at the end of the panel. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. Stefano, could you, from an Italian point of view, what are you seeing in terms of the, from a foreign trade aspect?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Yolanda. Thanks to the Chamber of Commerce, AICE, and also to the other speakers. From the Italian perspective, we see that due to COVID, import-export business will be more familiar with force majeure clauses. As you know, and as general rule, the debtor who fails to perform exactly what is due shall be liable to pay damages if does not prove that the non-performance or delay was caused by the impossibility of performance resulting from a cause not attributable to him. Force majeure is the typical example of a cause that is not attributable to the debtor. As per my knowledge in regards to this seminar, I would like to point out that most of the jurisdiction in Latin America define the concept of force majeure. Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Peru, to make an example. On the other hand, Mexico does not have a statutory definition of force majeure. The Italian law does not define the concept of force majeure. This concept was developed by the case law, and the definition is as force majeure, we define an extraordinary event, unforeseeable at the time the contractual relationship arose and inevitable, to which it is objectively impossible to resist and which cannot be overcome with the diligent effort of the debtor. In Italy, since the cause of force majeure is expression of fundamental principle of contract law above illustrated, it plays a role even if the parties to the contract have not included specific clause. We may, when we think about force majeure, we may think about three scenarios. The first one is the definitive and totally impossibility of one of the parties to perform the contract. These usually lead to the termination of the agreement. The partial impossibility of one party to perform the contract. In this case, the other party usually have two rights. The first one is corresponding the reduction of the performance it should deliver. The second right is to, as alternative, is to withdraw from the contract if it does not have an appreciable interest in receiving a partial performance. The third scenario and hypothesis is the unreasonable onerousness. In contrast with the continuous or periodical or deferred performance, and in case that the obligation of one party has become excessively onerous, the party who is obliged to such performance can demand the termination of the contract with retroactive effects. Based on the above, we may suggest in negotiation of new contract some aspects considering the COVID. First of all, to consider in the international agreements the applicable law and jurisdiction. It is absolutely advisable to choose law and jurisdiction where the judges are most sensitive to situations like COVID. in order to protect the real interest of both parties. It will be also important to make reference to pandemic event as event of force majeure. It would be also important to rule the mitigating action to be taken before force majeure can be relied on. We may also include, and we suggest to include, an enforceability requirement in force majeure clause if you want, for instance, exclude currently known events, for example, COVID-19, and it will be very, very important to rules in a clear manner the consequences of force majeure, for instance, providing the suspension of the obligation, the right of the party to terminate the contract if the force majeure event persists for an extended period of time, provide an obligation to renegotiate the agreement on fair basis, providing a penalty or excluding penalty in case of force majeure case. We have a suggestion also with regards the duration of the agreement. It will be advisable to enter into agreement or not too long duration, and also to provide a clause that view the price review. As the price of the raw materials, to make an example, decreased in these months, it will be advisable to insert clause that protect the parties in the event of future prices increase. With regards to the export to Latin America by EU nation companies, Laura already discussed about such profiles, and I totally agree with her. I think that there are great opportunities for European companies with regards to technology and health sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefano. And now, Luis Rolo from Portugal. What can you give us your view from a Portuguese market, please?
Hello, Yolanda. Thank you very much. Thank you to the Chamber of Commerce and to everybody who's attending. Portugal, regarding Latin America, is a specific case. Basically, the biggest sector that has increased in the past few years in Portugal has been tourism. So from starting around 2011, when we were at the height of the financial crisis and we had the bailout program, the main development of the economy was through the tourism sector, so both hotels and short-time rentals, with platforms such as Airbnb, and also some investment through golden visa programs, tax residency. So definitely the increase was through those sectors. Now, regarding Latin America, our main partner in business, and specifically in the tourism, golden visa, and tax residency sectors, is Brazil, of course, because of the language and the size of the country. So, with COVID, I would like to point out, and I'm going, with your permission, I'm going to put a very short PowerPoint presentation, if I may.
Absolutely.
Okay, so can everybody see the slides?
No, Luis, not yet.
Oh, okay, let me see if I can go through. So, what about now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, very good. So, before COVID-19, tourism was booming, of course, and regarding Brazil, as far as direct flights were concerned, we had 3 companies operating. So TAP Portugal was flying from 10 different Brazilian cities: São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Brasília, Belo Horizonte, Porto Alegre, Recife, Fortaleza, Salvador, Natal, and Campinas, to Lisbon, and also from São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro to Porto. Some of these flights were daily, some were 2, 3 times, 4 times a week. Also, LATAM, the company, was flying to Lisbon daily from São Paulo, and Azul was flying to Lisbon daily from Campinas. So we had hundreds and hundreds of people arriving from Brazil every day in Portugal. And definitely a lot of these were tourists or people who were moving here for golden visa or tax residency purposes. So after this, after COVID-19, the situation, of course, has changed. And now, basically what we have is that TAP Portugal is flying to Lisbon from São Paulo and Rio on a semi-weekly basis. So normally from São Paulo twice a week, from Rio once a week. And also regarding the airline, the financial problems are very serious. So the company was private, but now the majority of the share capital will be purchased by the government from Mr. David Neeleman at the Azul airline following this financial crisis. LATAM is not operating at the moment to Portugal. It may resume operation from 17th of July, and Azul has a weekly flight now from Lisbon to Campinas. So basically, what we have here is also, to make things worse, we have restrictions on entry regarding non-European citizens. And of course, anyone who's entering the EU space through Lisbon, they have measures which are enforceable in Lisbon airport upon arrival. So any non-European, any citizen who is a non-resident may only enter if he proves any health or urgent reasons to be admitted, because the general rule is non-admittance. And of course, non-European citizens who are residents in Portugal or other EU countries, even if non-European, they are allowed entry. So basically, what happened is that this pretty much killed the tourism industry in Portugal, starting in March. So the consequences were terrible. Speaking specifically about the impact of the force majeure clause in this situation, what happened is that, for instance, people had ongoing purchase contracts for real estate in Portugal, and they are invoking force majeure to not to fulfill these contracts, not to move forward. So in Portugal, according to Portuguese law, we have an article 437 of the Civil Code that establishes as a rule that any force majeure, any new condition that was not expected at the time of the signing of the contract, the rule is that it does not automatically lead to cancellation of contracts. The concept is that the contracts have to be revised, downsized, reduced, but only as a last resource cancelled. Also, now with this situation, basically the idea is to, and the solution might be to develop the healthcare, senior living sectors. There are good investment opportunities here, and also hopefully to, as the pandemic starts to decrease, to redevelop the tourism and real estate investment, but perhaps with some regard to these both healthcare and senior living sectors. So that's basically it, and of course I'm available for any questions that any of our participants may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. We can really relate to you, because as you obviously, for Spain and Italy, tourism is also a very important part of the economy, and hopefully as the pandemic starts to slow down and not come back, we'll see the economy hopefully starting to pick up, and for airlines to be able to continue with to fly across the planet. Taking from you, Luis, in terms of clearly governments across the planet have been running to implement emergency measures to combat the impact of COVID. I would like to focus now between our speakers in Miami and San Francisco in terms of what do you expect, or which countries you think have been more virtuous in terms of bringing out national aid for companies after the pandemic, and what these opportunities you're seeing that could arise from these measures that governments are implementing? Do you think also that would have a positive impact on international trade, or on the contrary, that these measures will benefit local companies and would be more difficult for foreign companies to benefit from? Could you read, please?
Yes.
Your view?
Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Oh, good. All right. So I don't believe that the stimulus packages are designed to encourage exportation, to encourage the enjoyment of business opportunities in new or foreign markets. They seem to be, in my opinion, very insular. And the 17 million unemployed workers, the U.S. economy, as do all economies, depends largely on consumer spending. Recently, for small businesses, the U.S. efforts have been making available $10 million, up to $10 million for a small business for a paycheck protection program, which is a loan, which then actually converts to a grant under some circumstances. And there was also a $1,200 per taxpayer payment to help persons suffering from cash issues. This, of course, does not compare well to Canada, wherein there is a $1,400 payment per month, or the United Kingdom, paying 80% of a worker's salary, Denmark 75%, the Netherlands. The true way to look at this is the impact and percentage of the gross national product of these countries. And here, the efforts of the United States at its stimulus is 13% of the gross national product, Sweden at 12%. The efforts of stimulus in Japan, however, account for 21% of the gross national product. And so there are many, many different stimulus programs. But let me focus now on whether or not any of the stimulus programs would have a positive effect on investment in Latin America. In 2019, Latin America, in the opinion of many, was not a very viable investment destination. Brazil was enjoying its fourth year of unemployment above 10%. Argentina and Ecuador were either in or about to be in default. And Mexico was in recession. And so even before the coronavirus situation erupted, certain aspects of Latin America were not particularly appealing for investment. Now, we do have some stimulus efforts. Peru, its stimulus efforts account for 9% of its gross national product, and it's rather aggressive and very good. Mexico, on the other hand, those stimulus efforts account for only 1% of the gross national product. The IMF, as many of you know, has projected that the Latin American economies now, as a result of what was occurring in 2019 and now significantly aggravated and exacerbated by the coronavirus pandemic, the economies in Latin America will shrink 5.2% in the year 2020. And this year alone will force nearly 30 million Latin American residents into poverty who were not in poverty prior to this time. It's a very bleak situation, which we can only hope and pray will be cured soon. The investment opportunities are certainly there, and investment in foreign markets being one way to help the local economy to rebound and recover from the effects of the coronavirus. Although I'm not seeing that currently as something that is designed to be a destination of stimulus funds. That, in my humble opinion, and apparently in the opinion of others, is a bit short-sighted. And as I said earlier, a bit insular. And we can only hope that that will change. The details, I think, of the stimulus program in the United States are well known, and I don't need to belabor how that all works. It is in excess of $2.6 trillion at this time. Again, for 13% of the gross national product, and so I guess it could actually be more. Bottom line, and I'll conclude with this, the stimulus packages around the world differ country to country. They focus on wages mostly and focus on unemployment benefits because that seems to most economists to be where we should aim these efforts so as to get businesses and people back to work. That's, again, short-sighted, but that is the immediate goal. And that seems to be where we are. And again, I will, as the other speakers have said, be very pleased to answer any questions that may occur.
Thank you, Reid, for your input. I tend to be a positive person, so I believe hopefully that with all the measures that the government are taking, we will hopefully start seeing the recovery soon, and these countries coming out as well from the current pandemic. Now going to Mike Brown. Mike, what can you tell us from San Francisco? I mean, it's also very. What can you tell us today? I think you need to open your microphone, Mike.
Here I am.
Hello.
Thank you very much. It's great to hear from everybody. I wish I was in Tokyo or London with all of you. So first, just to answer your question and to add to what Reid said, I agree with Reid that most of the United States efforts have been focused on supporting individuals and businesses here, particularly to encourage the retention of employees. So businesses were given what is called a loan, the Paycheck Protection, a PPP loan program, but effectively it was a government grant to businesses. And so businesses that took advantage of it are required to keep their employees until the end of that period. I think it's actually been successful in many ways in helping companies delay the serious impacts of losing customers or operations. But it is, again, it's a temporary measure, and it's one that the hope was that it would bridge the gap between where where things would have been if there'd been no help. A thing that Reed didn't mention, I'll mention, is the federal government, the U.S. government created a very low interest rate environment, which I know is a global impact, but effectively turning our interest rates almost to 0%. So if a loan is granted now based on the various federal measures, those measures would indicate an interest rate closer to 2% or even less. And so that has a benefit to businesses that are bullish on what's possible, that there is availability of financing. In terms of, I wanted to turn next to your question about opportunities. And then I did want to comment on some of the legal issues that were mentioned. On the opportunity side, first I'll comment, my law firm, you can see in the background, if you're watching me on video, I'm in my office. But we're experiencing maybe 10 to 20% of the people in our office are here at any given day. So we're using social distancing, and I wear my mask on a regular basis. So I should probably finish the rest of this video on mask, but I'll take it off since no one else is here. With regard to what's been interesting to us is the business environment has surprised us in that business is continuing. A lot of my work is involved in either business mergers or investments or joint ventures or real estate in the same area. And when we had the recession back in 2008, 9, and 10, there was a significant drop in transactions, immediately impacted. And what I remember from that time was the idea was that no one really knew what anything was worth. The seller had a higher idea about what something was worth. The buyer thought that prices would still come down. And because of those two, and thirdly, the banking system was significantly impacted, so loans weren't really available. I don't see any of those things happening right now. There seems to be a sense of long-term value that continues to drive transactions. I'm not seeing people hold back from a deal that they were contemplating just because they're worried prices will go down or up. And secondly, the financing is available. So as a result of that, plus the PPP loans, which are effectively encouraging people to keep their employees, my sense is that our business has retained a lot of the vitality that was not true of the last what we sometimes call the Great Recession. In terms of how long this will last and what our sense is in the business community, I think we're sensing that until there's truly a cure, truly a vaccine, that we're all expecting that we'll continue to work remotely. Major companies like Facebook and Google in San Francisco and around Silicon Valley have announced that their employees will be working remotely until January. And that was a decision they made a month ago or 2 months ago. So I think that may be extended. With regard to tourist activity, our economy is also the San Francisco Bay Area, California, significant impact with tourism. So without tourism at the same level, the business is definitely impacted. I wanted to mention force majeure. As I understand it, force majeure dates back to Roman times. So I understand all of your countries are used to using this. I will say that until this pandemic, very little attention was usually given to force majeure clauses. They were present in construction contracts, large project contracts because of the possibility of weather impacts, but generally they were focused on weather. Places like California where there's earthquakes, maybe they were focused on earthquakes. Now, because of the pandemic, we're using the word pandemic, and many of our contracts now have a very explicit provision on what happens in the deal, what happens in the transaction or the contract performance if either the government shutdown is impacting the business activity. For example, you may be depending on timeline, but if the timeline can't be met. These contracts have been written to either allow a longer performance or to allow the other party to cancel the contract. In terms of, I want to talk about opportunities specifically. We have clients who are involved, a lot of clients in the biopharma, biomanufacturing, distribution, as well as science. And we have one of our clients is in the process of creating a biomanufacturing facility near not within 20 miles of my office, and we're involved in creating right now a nonprofit along with the local government to encourage that. So I was pleased to see the faith that effort reflects, faith in the return of the economy and the recognition that opportunity will be there. It was a long-term idea that it's going to take a while to come together, but it is moving ahead. We have a client who makes cleaning products, and since cleaning products are highlighted now with the concern about germs on surfaces and elsewhere, and this client is looking to increase their markets, and they're looking at Latin America as an example of where they might be able to find new markets for their product. We have another client who is involved in importing PPE. In English, we say personal protective equipment. I think in Spanish and French, it's EPI. But the same, he has had connections with Chinese manufacturing, and he's been involved in connecting manufacturing with products. And I know one of the concerns everybody has is always product. Trusting that the product will actually be what is advertised. And so having direct involvement of trusted partners has helped him build a market. Lastly, I wanted to share that I think there's opportunities here in the US, and I'm sure around the world, but the opportunities include if you believe the economy will continue and will return, perhaps stronger than ever, if our U.S. presidential election goes the way I hope it does, which is all my politics for the moment. But I will tell you that I used to work for Senator Joseph Biden when I was in my 20s. I think highly of the man. But until then, we probably will not see significant national strategies change. And as a result, businesses, if you believe that business will come back in a strong way, then the question is, are you a buyer? So if your clients are interested in investing, they may find that some companies who are struggling are open to new business terms that would allow for joint ventures or purchases of businesses that will be stronger in the future than they are now. But I do believe there's impacts of the economy that some of the small businesses that were not strong will not continue, and there are businesses that are going to close. And so one comment is, if anybody has an interest in certain sectors or they're wondering if there are opportunities, I think there are businesses that are going to be available to sell, either a joint venture or a controlling interest, or completely sell their assets. And I think that's an area where we'll be busy.
Okay.
And I think that answers your questions. I hope.
Absolutely, Mike. Thank you very much, and thank you for sharing your insights and your opportunities with all the participants here today. Now I would like to go back and focus on our speakers in Latin America, in Peru, Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. We've seen clearly in the US, but especially in some European markets where e-commerce was still, there was a lot of demand, but we've seen basically that, a huge increase during lockdown on the e-commerce. To our speakers in LATAM, what would be the tax and customs implications for foreign companies that are selling through commercial channels in e-commerce, and which countries have the best conditions for foreign companies to operate in these sectors? When I talk about countries, I'm referring to your specific countries. could you give us an insight onto either what are the best investment opportunities right now in your countries, and then to touch a little bit on the e-commerce, please? And first will be our participant from Peru, please. Angel?
Yes, hello, can you see me and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, if I may say first, I don't completely agree with my previous colleagues, because the situation, I think, that in developed countries and in developing countries or LATAM countries is completely different, you know, because this is at least what we are experiencing with our clients in Peru. No? Businesses for them are already bad. No? The situation for LATAM countries is completely different, and I am very optimistic when this investment scenario for our clients and for all the companies that want to invest in Peru. It is true that the impact on the economy has been devastating, with a 40% drop, I think it was in April. I'm talking about Peru. But in view of this, there are governments that are launching amazing investment programs that means a lot of opportunities for foreign companies. No? In Peru, our government has launched a program called Restart Peru, or in Spanish, Arranca Peru, which contains an investment plan that aims to generate more than 1 million jobs. And the most important thing for foreign companies is that the total investment for the Restart Peru program is nearly 6.5 billion soles. And this program will be focused on the infrastructure in health, education, agriculture, employment, transport, construction. And even a very good example of this are the recent government-to-government cooperation agreements that Peru has signed. I can mention two of them. The first one was with the United Kingdom, and the one we signed with the United Kingdom, it aims to invest more than 7 billion in reconstruction works over a period of 2 years to carry out the reconstruction works in the areas affected by El Niño phenomenon and the areas affected with the COVID-19. No? Peru's agreement with the United Kingdom provides for the construction of 15 different hospitals and 74 educational institutions in 8 different regions. The British government, in this case, this is a good info for our British colleagues, will be responsible for selecting, in a transparent, efficient, and highly demanded manner, the construction and supervision of the execution of the different works that are going to be tendered. Last Saturday, we also signed an agreement with France, and this contract was signed to improve and to expand the health services of 2 hospitals, the biggest hospitals in Peru, in Cusco, where Machu Picchu is, and the Sergio Bernales Hospital in Lima, through a state-to-state agreement that will be benefit more than 3.4 million people. No? This agreement will be implemented through the Ministry of Health and involve an investment of around 20 million euros. No? And it was already awarded to 2 French companies, Aegis Bâtiments International, for our French colleagues, and APHP International, and they have been designated by the French government in a local tender to execute the works. No? Concerning your question, Yolanda, okay, we have a current framework of incentives for the protection of foreign investments that is granted subject to the investment registration. This makes or guarantees investors the right to make transfers to other countries. We also have a system called the early recovery of VAT, and it aims to return the VAT paid for import and local acquisition operations and intermediate goods, capital goods, construction services, and contracts used in the execution of a particular project, provided it is in a pre-production stage equal or more than 2 years. We also have tax refunds systems that consist of refunding the general sales tax imposed on the imports and local acquisition of new capital goods, new intermediate goods, services, construction contracts, carried out during the pre-production stage. And we also have the so-called legal stability agreements that it gives the investors greater predictability regarding the execution of their investments. Well, that will be my answer concerning this specific topic.
Thank you, Angel. That's definitely very interesting, and I like your positive spirit. So we'll pass now to Brazil. First with Claudia from the Sao Paulo office. Claudia, hello. Claudia, I think you need to switch on your microphone.
Sorry. In comparison to other countries, the into Brazil are subject to heavy import duties in order to protect the national industry. Actually, in view of federal authorities issue regulations reducing to zero the customs duty and the federal VAT in relation to products to be used for the disease control, such as medical device, pharmaceutical products, coronavirus tests, among others. And nowadays, what we can see, the most attractive sectors to invest in Brazil are the sanitation, in view of new recent legislation on the matter. Such legislation allows private companies, by means of public concession, to provide basic sanitation services such as clean water supplies, sewage treatment, and garbage recycling. The objective of this legislation is to have, until December 2033, clean water supply to 99% of the population and sewage collection to 90% of the population. In addition to that, we believe that the following sectors represent good investment opportunities, which are medical devices, housing, internet broadband, health, education, technology, and telecommunication. I believe if Laerte wants to complement my answers, that will be okay.
Thank you, Claudia. So we're passing now to Laerte Castro in Fortaleza.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for organizing and inviting us for this webinar. I'd like to start with a general overview of Brazil from the economic perspective, because there's a lot of interesting things going on. The first one is that Brazil now much cheaper for foreign investors due to the coronavirus crisis. The Brazilian currency, real, has significantly devaluated. So we have 10 Brazilian reais have dropped from 22 euros in January 1st to 16 euros on July 1st, which means 27% less in 6 months. In the Brazilian capital markets, according with the Brazilian Stock Exchange Index, known here as Ibovespa, Brazilian companies are now 18 cheaper than they were 6 months ago. The Selic interest rate, which is a monetary policy interest rate in Brazil, which means the key tool used by the Central Bank of Brazil for the implementation of the monetary policy, has never been so low in the Brazilian history, and now is 2.25% for a year. This means that financing lines tend to be cheaper for companies and consumers, boosting business investment and popular expenditure in Brazil. The deficit of Brazilian public accounts, which may reach now 700 billion reais this year, consider the drop in the Brazilian GDP in the same period, this should cause public indebtedness to exceed 90% of the GDP. As a result, in many cases, private capital will be the key solution for infrastructure projects through private-public partnerships and public concessions. We have judicial recoveries of companies are increasing, and I can tell you, for example, that in May, compared to April, we have an increase of 30% of company recoveries request filed in the courts of Brazil. This will create possibilities for buying devaluated assets and part of business in public tenders. The federal government in Brazil has created some companies aid programs during the coronavirus crisis, especially financing lines for working capital through public investment banks such as BNDES. It has also granted the deferral and installment of federal tax debts. Well, we see a lot of business opportunities in Brazil in several markets. We are going to mention at least 5, which we think that now are the most important. Brazil has the largest and most developed e-commerce market in Latin America, ranking the 10th in the world for most e-commerce sales. In 2019, the 212 million strong population has spent approximately $16.8 billion online. It's a very important market also for renewable energy. Brazil is a very special case. More than 80% of the energy produced in Brazil comes from renewable sources. The Federal Ministry of Mines has recently estimated that by 2029, a total required investment of 94 billion in the energy sector will be required. In the sunny and windy Northeast region, where I am, in Será, is a perfect spot for photovoltaic and wind power plants. Brazil has a deficit of 7 million new houses, according with IBGE, which is the Brazilian Institute for Research. With the actual low interest rate, consumers will have access to financing lines, and this will boost the housing construction market in Brazil again. Private hospitals, which were generally growing at a fast pace and had a high profitability, suffered a loss of revenue in the midst of the pandemic. This happened because they had a reduction on the demand of highly complex surgeries and tests with a greater margin. This adverse scenario creates opportunity for the best positioned operators and investors. Private schools and colleges also in universities also suffer from the impact of the pandemic. The crisis has increased the default rate in the sector and shall freeze or reduce the tuition fees for the upcoming months. With the pandemic, the telecommunication companies in Brazil require capital to expand infrastructure and traffic capacity. Those who already had infrastructure installed in a medium and large cities are targeted. Small and medium providers are cheap, and especially for foreign investors due to the favorable exchange rate. And finally, in addition, we would never forget that Brazil is the largest economy in the world and largest in Latin America. It has about 7,400 kilometers of coastline that provides privileged access to North America, Europe, and Asia. In addition, has borders with 10 countries in South America. It's one of the world's largest exporters of meat, coffee, sugar, soybeans, and iron ores, and has more than 19 million companies, in which 85% are small business. So this is a general outlook we would like to give, and we keep at your disposal to answer any further questions, especially if you have about the e-commerce in Brazil.
Thank you very much, Laerte. That was a very good overview on Brazil. We'll jump quickly to Argentina, to Maria Claudia Vidal.
Hello, everyone. Can you see me and hear?
I can hear you. Yes, we can see you. Great. Thank you.
Well, I am attorney at Polina Feveri de Local Yellow, a law firm based in Buenos Aires. As it was mentioned, in this moment, Latin America is having the worst of the pandemic, and Argentina is going through the worst moment of it. Until 17th of July, the province of Buenos Aires, city of Buenos Aires, and some other locations of Argentina are in a strict lockdown. In other cities, the restrictions are not so strong, but all depend on the evolution of the sanitary situation of the area. Despite this situation, we consider there are many challenges ahead in 2020 for Argentina. But it is important to highlight that Argentina started facing the pandemic situation with financial restriction and macroeconomic imbalances. The last 2 years, our economy is in a recession. Because of that, and mainly the effect of the pandemic, today the government is applying measures to alleviate the economic impact, focusing mainly in the small and medium business and on the most vulnerable economic sector economy. We believe, despite this, that in crisis time like the current one, there are several attractive investment opportunities for those willing to take the risk. The economic situation and the business possibility of Argentina, we have a lot of benefit for that purpose. Argentina has great natural resources like agribusiness, oil and gas, renewable energy, mining, lot of opportunity on the service sector such as software development, e-commerce, consulting, and also, well, I believe that in Argentina, big company with valuable assets, renowned local bank and consolidated business will need financial support once the pandemic has been overcome. We think that Argentina will have a lot of opportunity in the future to invest. One of the main areas that the interest of the government is the development of Vaca Muerta gas and oil resources. Before the pandemic, the government already had a new law project to regulate hydrocarbon and mining activity. In addition to Vaca Muerta, there are great development and investment opportunity in Latin mining sector and gold industry. On March, it was announced that Ganfeng Lithium International, a Chinese company, is going to build a solid-state lithium chloride plant in the province of Salta. Although we can mention the civil project in Salta, this project is being carried out by the Fortune Silver, a Canadian company. Most of these opportunities of development in this area are through tender in basis of the amount of the investment and the knowledge that this request. In July 2019, was published the call for a national and international public tender to the purpose of awarding a new license for the provision of the natural gas transportation service at Vaca Muerta. Unfortunately, because of this situation, the tender was postponed, but in the future it will go ahead. Other business that has increased a lot in the last year and is going to continue increasing is the fintech and e-commerce, as Solange has mentioned. The fintech and e-commerce segment in Argentina is going through an expansion phase, growing rapidly. And the pandemic has generated radical changes in our way of working and linking. In this context, electronic commerce constitutes one of the indispensable tools to adapt and keep the economy active. A good example of e-commerce in Argentina, we have Mercado Libre, a small company in the beginner that rapidly became one of the biggest Argentina companies in this kind of business. Before the pandemic, Argentina was already positioned as one of the main protagonists in the field of electronic commerce in Latin America, contributing significantly to the more than $84 million that in the region report in 2019 in terms of online sales. This according to the 2019 LATAM e-commerce report. Also, talking about fintech and e-commerce, the digital wallet has grown in popularity, reaching 6.5 million in the country. According to official figures, companies such as Mercado Pago experiencing a growth in operation regarding from 120% to 1,800% since the start of the pandemic. Projections for the rest of the year are favorable, and it stimulates that the amount could increase up approximately to 10 or 15 million by December 2020. We consider that the e-commerce is going to grow rapidly in Argentina, also because all this situation of the COVID made this business increase a lot, because all the people, most of the people are now in the houses and working and linking through internet and doing work and buying through all these pages. Also, we believe that once the pandemic has been overcome, we think that the market of real estate will be a very attractive market in which invest. The prices of the market will be very competitive for those who are thinking in investing property for themselves or as an investment for resales. About the issue, the topic of tax burden, it's very difficult to give a brief of the tax consideration that apply, because different taxes will be applied depending on the business you are going to invest, and also the rate vary depending on the type of activity and jurisdiction in which the activity is being developed. In Argentina, we have different types of taxes: federal, provincial, and municipal. Like federal, the commons are income tax, value-added tax, personal asset tax, custom duty. In terms of provincial taxes, we have turnover taxes. So depends the activity that you want to do. It's going to depend the rate of the taxes and the benefit that you have. For example, if we talk about value-added tax, the general rate is 21%, but there is some exception. For example, this tax is applying also to import of goods and services. Certain goods are taxes is reduced rate of 10.4%, and some services to the 27%. So as I mentioned, the average rate depends on the activity and also the jurisdiction. But it's also important to mention that some activities have tax incentives, like software industry, biofuel industry, modern biotechnology, among others. Some benefits are the reduce of the rate of the taxes, possibility to loan, reduce on social security contribution paid. For example, if you want to look for the most benefit taxes in Argentina, if you establish the activity or the company in the province of Tierra del Fuego, or exists there, the assets are exempt from the most of the national taxes. We think that Argentina has a lot of opportunity to invest, and also we think that in the future, Argentina is going to be a very attractive market to invest due to the exchange rate. Nowadays, Argentina is facing an economical situation, and it's going to be very important, and I think that the government is going to give benefits and establish different things to make Argentina a market to invest.
That would be fantastic, Claudia. Thank you for sharing the opportunities in Argentina as well with us. Now, last but not least, we have to join Manuel Leza from Uruguay, and that will be our last participant, and then we'll go into the Q&A, because I can see from the message from the chat that there's already a few questions for Uruguay. So Manuel for Peru as well. So Manuel, can you share your views on Uruguay, please?
Hi everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. And yes, so I will start giving a general point of view and some background in respect of Uruguay. Is a very little country between two big ones, Argentina and Brazil. And we have some special conditions right now going on in Uruguay due to the fact that we have a new government from the 1st of March this year. And 10 days after assuming, the new government had to declare the emergency due to COVID crisis. So we have some kind of blend here in Uruguay, and the new government with a liberal investment agenda, improving the investment agenda we had for 15 years with the left party that we had until the 1st of March. They are looking for opportunities, and as we are a very small country, we don't have internal consuming because we are 3 million. And that is the main reason we are an open door country, and we are always looking to the other countries, North America, South America, and of course, Europe. And I think that our biggest asset from a general point of view is the stability. We come from 15 years of the left party government, and we are establishing a new right president from a political point of view, and we have no changes at all. We improve some aspects of our political issues we had, but there are no big changes and not big crises in the change of power. So I believe that's one of the biggest assets we have here in Uruguay, stability, and is something pretty rare to see this in a turbulent region we have in South America. So we are pretty glad of that. And going to the question, Uruguay has a general investment benefits regime, governed mainly by the law 16906, and this regime had new adjustments due to the new government and due to the COVID crisis, okay? And this law makes a distinction between two groups of tax incentives. The first one is in respect of the IRAE, that mainly is corporate income tax. So if you have a good project and with the necessary size, you file this to the government office, and it is likely you could get no tax for the corporate income tax for your project. And on the other hand, in the same law, we have the specific investment incentives. So the eligibility for exemptions may apply to a specific sector or activity, and the following sectors have been promoted: call centers, sharing service centers, shipping and electronics industry, manufacturing, agriculture, machinery and equipment, power generation, tourism, forestry industry, treatment, and final disposal of industrial solid wastes, among others, okay? And I would like to tell you about the free trade zones that we have here in Uruguay. It's something some countries in Europe have, and in Southeast Asia. If you install your back office or your company in this free trade zone in Uruguay, you will have no tax at all. So with the only condition that you have a good business plan, you have to employ some Uruguayans, and the other condition is to sell these services or goods abroad and never to Uruguay. So this is a very good tax regime, and it's very attractive to those companies that export services or goods and would like to settle their back office here in Uruguay.
Thank you, Manuel. That was fantastic. I think stability is what we all need now, with all the pandemic. And so we'll pass quickly now to the Q&A, because I can see there's a few questions. I'll start from one of the last questions that it says, I am a brand new food exporter. I was wondering whether LATAM countries, and most of all Peru, are easing importing custom procedures following the pandemic. Maybe it's easier we start with Ángel from Peru.
Okay, thank you. Well, let me check the question. Read the question, please. I'm a brand-new exporter. Was wondering whether LATAM countries are easing importing customs. Okay, customs in Peru are still working and open. We have only established an easing importing customs procedure for medical devices and drugs, no? So we are applying the regular customs tariffs also regime that is from 4%, 7%, and 12%. And if I am not wrong, the agricultural products, we have like 762 different codes for agricultural products. Like, okay, that will be the answer. It's only open and easy for medical devices and products.
Okay, thank you, Ángel. I don't know if any of the participants from the other Latin American countries want to add on something to your answer.
Yes, I'd like to, please.
Yes.
Okay. Regarding import procedures in Brazil, Brazil is by definition a very bureaucratic country, but all the system now is electronic, so they have been improving the time for taking the importation out of the customs in Brazil. But we suggest when you export to Brazil, you have a minimum of 30 days stay period with the container, otherwise you will pay demurrage. It's very probably that you can pay it. So we recommend that when you export into Brazil, you make a contact with advisor before. If it's importation that we are doing from Brazil, that is urgent importation, for example, medical materials during the pandemics, etc., we can lower the stay period of these equipments in the airport or in the port significantly. For example, we did recently a transaction in Brazil for importing masks and our surgery equipment during the pandemics, and we didn't take more than 3 days to take the merchandise out of the airport. So for urgent matters, we can do a very good job in a few days, but otherwise, if it's a regular importation, it may take a lot of time. That's our reality in Brazil.
Okay, thank you very much, Laerte. And now again for another question for Ángel from Peru. There are two questions actually. If you could give a recent example on stability agreement, okay, and if you could also give some information about the opportunities in Peru regarding jointly projects with EU companies in the area of research and development, from bringing innovation health technologies for covering the unmet needs of the Peruvian market.
Okay, let me check. Yes, of course. The most recent stability agreement was signed in May, so 2 months ago, with the Chinese group China Costco Shipping Corporation Limited. It was an agreement signed with Pro Inversión is our investment agency and the Ministry of Transport and Communications. And this stability agreement was signed for the mega project Chancay Multipurpose Port Terminal. No? This is going to be like the biggest project in Lima, and the first stage of investment comprises an investment amounting almost $50 million, and in total it will be a project of around $300 million. Okay, that will be the first question. The second one, opportunities, jointly products in Europe, in the area, research, well, that's an excellent and challenging question. The fact is that the many initiatives are currently being considered in diverse business associations and also in the public sector to provide health services with platforms that allow doctors and patients to interact in what will be the so-called nueva normalidad, as we call it in Spanish, or new normality. From 2013 onwards, the business and public sector committed itself to developing a series of initiatives beyond the action of the public sector and took three specific challenges. The first one was increasing the number of beds based on a system of free interchangeability, to have or to count on a single and shared digital medical record, and to achieve greater efficiency in health spending. So could you imagine if we would have done this 7 years ago? Well, in 7 years, not enough work was done, and those challenges that the government and the private sector took in 2030 did not seem a priority, have proven to be more urgent than ever today. No? If a universal digital medical record had been available, information crossovers could have been made care to take for vulnerable patients more quickly, or to target and to stop the progression of the virus, as was the successful history from Korea. No? So, in my opinion, for these reasons, a large niche of business is emerging for European companies specializing in these issues and specializing in hospital information system, softwares, and so on. Okay, that will be my answer.
Okay. Thank you very much, Angel. Do we have any further questions? Okay, if there are no further questions, I would like to thank again all the participants' availability for joining to the webinar today. It's been very interesting, especially under times, to be able to have the opportunity to have the view of so many of you in different markets and give us your brief overview. I understand it's very difficult to go into detail with such a short time that we've given, but that's why if anyone wants to go into more to enter into more detail, all the participants today are available to discuss further. We thank you. Important time that we all work as part of a team to help for markets, and economies to recover. So from the chamber, we can only thank you again for your participation, and stay safe, everyone, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
If any of you want to do a last intervention, Laura, Stefano.
Just to thank everybody. Thank you so much, and to the Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Jamendo.com